going on, DFS community? Welcome to the Week 3 edition of one of the most accurate DFS shows in the industry. This is episode number 65 of the Adjusted Line Play Report, where we take a deep dive into the play in the trenches to determine the game scripts and player outcomes of this week. The show is presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I am your host, Todd Hoffman. You can actually find myself over on Twitter at ToddZilla1337. And you can find Zilla Fantasy Elite over on Twitter or X, whatever it's called these days, at Zilla Fantasy. All right. Week 3 edition here. Hopefully you guys took some of the advice from the Week 2 edition. Just a reminder, we called that Saints upset. Alvin, Kamara, big game. Josh Jacobs, heavy workload. Quentin, Johnston, big DFS week. Hopefully you guys got some of those plays. Even, some of the guys that I was super high on. James Conner from the Arizona game. He had a solid game, not super good, but the Arizona team in general cranking out a ton of touchdowns as we had predicted. So off to a good start this year with some of those things. So let's get into it with our first game of the week, or highest game total of the week, I guess. Let's go into Detroit and Arizona. Actually, let's move this over a little bit. All right. Detroit and Arizona game is the number one game total on the slate this week. So got a big one here, 51.5 Vegas game total here, actually bet down from 52.5 earlier in the week. We have Detroit as 3-point road favorites going into Arizona. It gives them a 27.25 team implied total here. Arizona at 24.25 for their team implied total. And actually, they are the first and fourth ranked teams in the entire main slate here. So two top 5 teams on the slate, obviously going to have a high outcome here, and probably one that you're going to want to attack in DFS just from the Vegas line. So getting into the away team here, we have Detroit number 1 in offensive pass protection and number 26 in offensive pass DVOA, so that doesn't really make sense. But remember, the offensive pass protection, that is just an adjusted sack rate, so Detroit not getting sacked, especially in situations where you wouldn't expect it. So the offensive line holding up pretty well in terms of giving up sacks. But Detroit not very effective on a play-by-play basis with the pass plays. If you saw the end of the game last week, a bunch of dump-offs to Jahmyr Gibbs when it was like 2nd and 8, 3rd and 8, and they just weren't gaining any yards, and they just kept dumping it off to Gibbs with no real chance of getting a first down in some of their plays. So they're down there at 26th. Fortunately for them, Arizona actually pretty good on the defensive pass rush, so they're getting a lot of sacks there, but number 24 in defensive pass DVOA. This is indicative, hey, this is a pretty close matchup. In these situations, typically studs eat, or if it's a red scenario here where the team like Detroit may be struggling a little bit with their pass game and they're going against a defense that also struggles, they might actually find it a little bit easier to pass in this particular matchup. So wouldn't be shocked to see Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown have pretty good games here, especially looking at the run defense and run blocking here, which was pretty evenly matched. Detroit probably going to be moving the ball a lot better through the air than on the ground in this particular matchup. So I don't mind attacking that Detroit pass game in this matchup, getting all of those options that I mentioned before, and then maybe throwing in the tight end there, Laporta. I know he hasn't had a great year so far, but especially here, if this Arizona pass rush is getting after Detroit and maybe giving a little bit of pressure, you might see some more action to Laporta in this game versus Jameson Williams. So it might be more of a Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown type of game than a Jameson Williams type of game this week. I know Jameson Williams is probably going to be pretty popular in DFS. Might be somebody that you actually want to fade, especially if you think Arizona's going to get after him. If you think they're going to be plenty of time for Detroit to pass the ball, Jameson Williams certainly in play. I'd mentioned the run blocking, 6 versus 6, and then Detroit number 2 in offensive run DVOA, very good, but Arizona number 4. Detroit might find it a little bit tougher sledding to run the ball than they otherwise have so far this season, so keep that in mind. It's an even matchup, and typically, like I mentioned in those scenarios, I do say studs eat. Jahmyr Gibbs certainly seems like he's pretty good there. David Montgomery, not necessarily a stud, but very serviceable running back. Certainly above average NFL talent, I think, in terms of that regard. So I don't mind them being able to be effective on the ground. I just think they're going to have to air it out in order to move the ball more effectively in this matchup. So I like attacking the Detroit pass game here. On the Arizona side, they're number 21 in offensive pass protection. So below average there. Detroit in the top 10 at number 10. And we just saw Aiden Hutchinson last week absolutely wreck. Could be more of the same here against this Arizona offensive line where he's getting a bunch of pressure. Detroit, maybe a sneaky play for some sacks, but Kyler Mobile maybe gets away from those and doesn't take any of those sacks. Getting into the offensive pass DVOA, Arizona number 3, Detroit 14. This is indicative that Arizona, even though they might be under pressure, they're going to be pretty successful when they do pass the ball. I do like Trey McBride in those situations where if you have a stud that's, similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but for Arizona, I think that is the tight end McBride. I think he's going to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker. It's going to go to McBride, and he will be pretty successful with that. So Trey McBride is your tight end in DFS or whatever his line is, I guess, in the prop bets. Maybe bet the over on the receptions, bet the over on the yardage. He should have a pretty good game there. I'm not sure how Marvin Harrison will do in this particular one. He had 4 catches last week, half of them for touchdowns, 140 some odd yards, I believe, as well. So pretty effective with those 4 receptions. Now getting on the run side, James Conner was a smash last week. We see Arizona 19 in run blocking, 22 in run DVOA versus Detroit inside the top 10 in both of those. Actually top 5 for defensive run, stopping at number 5, and then run DVOA for Detroit number 9. Indicative that James Conner might actually struggle in this game. So both run games may struggle a little bit more than they have in the first 2 weeks, where the pass attack is how they're going to end up moving the ball. And it'll be a little bit interesting. A lot of times in these situations like Arizona here, where they're going to struggle running the ball and maybe be under a little bit of pressure, I don't mind the kicker here having a bunch of field goals. Don't remember off the top of my head who Arizona's kicker is. It's I think Detroit's old kicker from back in the day, and I like him having several field goal attempts in this particular matchup. So if you got a kicker league, he is certainly streamable this week if you haven't seen that already. In terms of pace of play, Detroit number 5 in overall offensive pace of play, number 1 in neutral situation. We're kind of ignoring these other ones at the moment. Offensive pace of play. When it's plus or minus 8 points, you can kind of pay attention to that for both of these since everybody's got one of those. But leading or trailing by 7+, those ones, not everybody has stuff. So Detroit actually pace of play while trailing by 7+, they don't even have a number register because they haven't ran a single play while trailing by 7+ points. So that's why that's blank. But yeah, otherwise a quick pace here for Detroit. Arizona actually 30th in overall pace of play. That does include when they're leading up by a ton. So offensive pace of play while leading is 30th. So one of the slowest while they're leading, but their offensive neutral situation. So they're a little bit above average in terms of, hey, if it's a neutral situation, they're not blowing somebody out or they're not down by a bunch of points. Neutral situation, first 3 quarters minus the 2-minute warning time in the first half, and if it's within 8 points, that's what offensive neutral situation is. Arizona 13th there, so fairly fast between these two. If we think it's going to be a close affair, they're passing the ball back and forth. I think that's how this game's going to go. It should be close. Vegas says, 3-point line here. I do like Detroit's odds a little bit better here of winning, so I think there's an appropriate line. But that's how we're going to attack the adjusted line play reports moving forward. Hopefully this first one gives you a little bit of an insight to how that goes. Now we got a fun one here for the second game on the main slate. Philly going into New Orleans in the Dome there, a 49.5 point Vegas game total. Again, second best on the slate. Pretty healthy Vegas game total there. New Orleans, 2.5 point home favorites, giving them a 26 team implied total with Philadelphia at 23.5 team implied total. New Orleans, number 2 on the entire slate. Philadelphia, number 8 on the slate. So some of these top scoring teams on the slate are, facing opponents who also plan on scoring a lot of points. So that's good for DFS. That's good for fantasy football. Getting into the Philadelphia side, they are number 7 in offensive pass protection. New Orleans 12 in pass rush. Again, that's adjusted sack rate, slightly in the favor of Philly, but nothing to write home about there. And then the offensive pass DVOA, number 8 for Philadelphia, pretty good. New Orleans, number 4 in defensive pass DVOA. They've been pretty good. Wouldn't expect this to be a phenomenal game for Philadelphia throwing the ball. Probably have a decent amount of time, but not going to be super effective in terms of efficiency against this New Orleans defense, who seems to be pretty legit, at least through the first 2 weeks, having played Dallas and Carolina. So maybe a little bit inflated there from the Carolina game, but they still held their own against a very good Dallas team there. So keep that in mind. Pass game, nothing to write home about. We do have A.J. Brown out this week, so it's Devonta Smith. Saquon Barkley probably going to shoulder a heavier load in this particular game too. In the pass game option, Dallas Goedert there, and then some backup wide receivers that you're probably not super interested in playing in a matchup like this where it doesn't look super good in that regards. So offensive run blocking, Philadelphia 20th, run DVOA 12th, New Orleans number 9 in stopping the run, number 1 in defensive run DVOA. Now Carolina and Dallas, not exactly the best run games in the league. They got Chuba Hubbard and then, the ghost of Ezekiel Elliott and some guy named Rico Dowdle, who I believe was not drafted, so an undrafted free agent from several years back. These numbers might be a little inflated just due to that, but it looks like they should be able to handle themselves against Saquon Barkley. This is telling me if Philadelphia is going to be moving the ball, it's probably going to be via the air and not like super efficient. I'd expect Barkley to have to get involved there, so he might get there in terms of volume on the pass game if you play in PPR, but expect that run game to struggle and be pretty inefficient for the most part in this particular matchup. I don't like Philadelphia's chances of putting up a ton of points based off of their offensive outcome here for week 3. Getting into the New Orleans side, looks very good. So a lot of times on this adjusted line play report, we want to see green versus red. Every single one of New Orleans offenses is green, number 1 in run offense across the board. And then Philadelphia is red across the board. They're actually 31st and 32nd in the defensive run stopping and run DVOA. This is indicative of another monster Alvin Kamara week. I know he's had a good week 1, had a monster week 2, which we called here. This looks like he's in another smash spot for a huge game against this Philadelphia team. It's at home. Philadelphia does look to be, struggling on offense here. And if New Orleans is humming on offense, it could be another one of those big Alvin Kamara games. I did mention Jamal Williams could be one of those. If they're just blowing out Philadelphia here, he could see a touchdown or 2 just to give a respite to those guys if they're up by a ton in this matchup. And really based off of this, it's looking like New Orleans is really going to be doing well. Should have plenty of time to throw the ball. Should be very effective throwing the ball. So it could be a Rashid Shaheed, another long touchdown for the 3rd straight week. Chris Olave, obviously always in play. He's going to have a blow-up game here. This could be his situation where he's getting his 6 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. That could be his week. I like Alvin Kamara. Deep dart throws if you need a really cheap option. I think Jamal Williams is in play there as a backup running back late in this game, as New Orleans looks like they're going to manhandle Philadelphia in this particular game. Keep that in mind. Should be a very interesting one here. It does look like New Orleans should blow out Philadelphia, but obviously dealing with humans here, anything can happen, but it does look very favorable for New Orleans. If you're a betting person or you're in a state that can do that, I think I would bet New Orleans to cover that 2.5 line. I think they're going to absolutely boat race Philadelphia here. I think, something of the lines of 31 points for New Orleans, Philadelphia hitting 17 to 20, somewhere in that range, I think is a pretty good score for this matchup. All right, number 3 game on the slate. Baltimore heading into Dallas here. We have Baltimore actually as 1-point road favorites in this over Dallas. It's a 47.5 Vegas game total, pretty solid there. We do have Baltimore again as 1-point road favorites, so that gives them 24.25. Team implied total, Dallas at 23.25, so very close here. A lot of times this can lead to back and forth affairs, which is good. Baltimore, 4th best team implied total. Dallas, 9th best team implied total. So again, we see the top 3 matchups here where the opposing team, who's actually the underdog, has a pretty good weekly total for the team implied total. So keep that in mind as we go through your DFS lineups this weekend. Getting into the Baltimore side, number 3 in offensive pass protection. Dallas, number 5 in the pass rush, so they're able to get after the quarterback. Lamar is mobile, so he doesn't take as many sacks as possible, but Dallas could be getting after him, and I wouldn't be shocked to see Lamar get sacked 3 or 4 times in this particular matchup. And dead even here in offensive pass DVOA. So really, when that's the case, I say studs eat, and I really think Baltimore is going to lean on Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews in this type of game. If they're going to need to get the ball out a little bit quicker in this particular matchup, those two also work underneath the most out of all of their pass catchers. Isaiah Likely, the tight end, but he tends to be a little bit further downfield than Mark Andrews as well. So keep that in mind. I think those are the 2 people you're going to want to target in the pass game based off of this. And then the run blocking actually pretty heavily in favor of Baltimore. So number 22 in run blocking isn't great, but Dallas 32 in stopping the run. Absolutely got crushed by New Orleans last week, which was probably leading to this number 32 route on defense. But then Baltimore, number 3 in offensive run DVOA. Dallas, again, 31st there. So don't be surprised if Lamar Jackson has to get flushed out of the pocket quite a bit. Wouldn't be surprised to see him with 7-8 rush attempts in this particular matchup. And then Derrick Henry having a pretty solid game against this Dallas front in this particular matchup as well. Dallas, number 16 in offensive pass protection. Baltimore, number 9 in defensive pass rush. So they might be able to get after Dak here just a little bit. It's not a huge favor of Baltimore, but they should be able to apply some pressure, get some sacks on Dak. And then the offensive pass DVOA is in the favor of Baltimore, number 19. And then Dallas, number 27 in offensive pass DVOA. They've been otherwise pretty inefficient there. Looks like that will continue here against this Baltimore defense. And then the run stopping, heavily in the favor of Baltimore, number 2 in stopping the run. Dallas, middle of the pack at 15. Baltimore, 8 in run DVOA on defense. Dallas, again, middle of the pack at 15 in run DVOA. This is telling me Baltimore probably going to be pretty solid on defense. Their offense looks to be the best in the run game, and then kind of a neutral pass game there. So this 1-point Vegas line, I think Baltimore covers that definitely by more than 1 here. They look to be the better bet on offense to be moving the ball, especially on the ground. And then Dallas looks like they might struggle again in week 3 playing this Baltimore defense. The pace of play, though, should be pretty good. Baltimore number 5 in overall, and then number 4 in neutral situation. And then Dallas, number 7 in overall pace of play, but number 19 in offensive neutral situations. It looks like they're probably going to be down in this game. And then if they're trailing, they're actually one of the slower ones when trailing. But again, remember, not everybody's been trailing by 7+ so far. I think there's still 3 people that don't have that. But overall pace of play is actually pretty quick compared to the rest of the league. In terms of who you're going to want from Dallas, if they're going to be down, it's obviously CeeDee Lamb looks like the best bet here. And the run game is in a void. Otherwise, Jalen Tolbert, deep dart throw, and some DFS lineups if you want to think that Dallas is going to be down and passing a bunch in this game. All right, next game here we have Houston coming into Minnesota. Houston 1.5-point Vegas favorites here, coming on the road at a 46.5 Vegas game total. Again, that's the 4th best on the main slate here. So that gives Houston a 23.75 team implied total. Minnesota 22.25 team implied total. Houston 6th best on the slate. Minnesota 13th best team implied total on the slate. Getting into the Houston side, looks a little bit rough for them on the pass protection. So number 23 in offensive pass protection. Minnesota number 3 in defensive pass rush, so they've been able to get some sacks. Houston's been giving it up. This is the red-green matchup, suggestive that Minnesota may collect quite a few sacks in this particular matchup. And then Minnesota number 2 in defensive pass DVOA, Houston 19th in pass DVOA. Everybody kind of views Houston as this, juggernaut on offense passing the ball. It looks like they're going to struggle in that regard with Minnesota here in this offensive line and defensive line adjusted line play report. It looks like Minnesota is going to get after them. Houston probably going to be struggling to pass the ball. Now on the run blocking side, Houston number 3 in offensive run blocking, Minnesota 22nd in stopping the run. That looks like the biggest mismatch for Houston in terms of running the ball. But when you look at the DVOA, Houston number 7, Minnesota number 2 in the defensive run DVOA. So play-by-play basis, Houston might also struggle a little bit running the ball. That does look to be their best bet. The problem is Joe Mixon looks like he's not going to play. He's already down to doubtful. And then he didn't practice on Friday, neither did Dameon Pierce. So looks like both of their top 2 running backs are out. It's probably going to be the Cam Akers show. It's a revenge game for him against Minnesota, if you want to call it that. And they did look pretty good in the preseason, but he is coming off of Achilles tear, I believe. He's had 2 of them potentially now, so keep that in mind. I just don't see Houston, if that's the route that they're going, if they're going to be struggling in that pass game, Minnesota getting after it. I think Minnesota's defense is actually in play here against Houston. They're going to be really low rostered in DFS tournaments, and I could see them coming up with 5 or 6 sacks in this game, an interception maybe that they take back to the house, or if they're returning punts, something like that where they have a defensive touchdown as well. And then if Houston's best bet is running the ball and they only have Cam Akers and Dare Agumbawale, they might be in a little bit of trouble in this particular game. I just don't see them having a really high ceiling in this particular matchup. So this is the 4th highest Vegas game total. It's already not looking good for Houston. And then we dip into the Minnesota side. They're number 27 in offensive pass protection, so they have been taking sacks there with Sam Darnold. Houston, number 1 in the defensive pass rush. So this is another red-green matchup in the favor of the defense. This tells me Sam Darnold's going to have to get the ball out quick. Same with Houston up here, getting the ball out quick. And then pass DVOA for Houston, number 5, Minnesota number 14. Going to be struggling to get the ball out. We already have Jordan Addison ruled out. We have Justin Jefferson with a quad injury. Looks like he's probably going to play, but he might be, not 100% out there. And if he's a little bit hampered, we're looking at Jalen Nailor, some scrubs there at wide receiver and tight end. It might be the Aaron Jones show here if they're trying to get the ball out quick, so keep that in mind. And a lot of times when the number 1 receiver goes out, the running back actually sees a ton of targets in those particular matchups. So don't be shocked if Aaron Jones catches 5 or 6 passes in this game, just based off of the adjusted line play report here. And then the run game, Minnesota actually pretty good. Number 5, offensive run blocking. Number 6, an offensive run DVOA. So you think, maybe their run game will be good. You already told me Aaron Jones catching a lot of passes, but Houston, number 1 in stopping the run. Number 5 in the run DVOA. Really even matchup here, but slightly in the favor of Houston's defense. I think Minnesota is going to find it hard to move the ball as well. They're going to struggle a little bit on the run game aspect, a little bit more than they're perhaps used to through the first 2 weeks. So I think they struggle there. I think they're going to be under pressure in the pass game and not be very effective there. So this 46 Vegas game total, if you have the ability, hit the under on that. I think this is almost a near lock. I don't know what we can do for that. Let's do a near lock. My microphone probably picked that up as well, which is not intended. But yeah, I think we're looking at the under on here. It's maybe we want the loser trombone. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a great matchup here. I think both offenses are going to struggle. I think both defenses are in play here for DFS and in your season-long leagues. I think both kickers are going to have really good games here in terms of getting maybe 3 or 4 field goal attempts. I see this being more of a 12 to 10, a 10 to 17 at most type of matchup. And I think this Vegas game total is way overinflated based off of this adjusted line play report. And yeah, I think that's just going to be one of those that you want to avoid. It might be a pretty popular game in DFS, actually, based off of how the offenses have performed so far. I think some people might be attacking this one. It's one that I'm going to be fading for sure in week 3 DFS. All right, next game, perhaps a shocker, Chicago and Indianapolis. After Chicago has struggled mightily through the first 2 weeks, Indianapolis, we saw really struggle last week against Green Bay. They are the 5th best game total on the slate, but we jumped down all the way from 46 down to 43.5 now. I believe they are tied for 5th here on the week, so 43.5. It's a 1-point Indy favorite at home. That gives them a 22.25 team implied total. In Chicago, 21.25 for their team implied total. 13th and 15th best in this main slate, respectively. Looking at the offensive pass protection, or in general, the offensive line for Chicago, it's red across the board, as you can see up here. Offensive pass protection, 32nd and 30th. Offensive run blocking, 32nd, and run DVOA number 28. So not very good there, but fortunately for them, despite Indianapolis maybe being middle of the pack in terms of adjusted sack rates, they are 29th in defensive pass DVOA. So I don't think we're going to see Caleb Williams, not under pressure, but he might be a little bit more effective than we've seen throughout these first 2 weeks in terms of getting the ball out. Now, we already have Keenan Allen ruled out, so DJ Moore and Roma Dunze, I think, are your best options in the pass game. DeAndre Swift does get involved there too, so keep that in mind. If you think Indianapolis is going to be getting after the quarterback, he might be a good option. And Gerald Everett, actually kind of a sneaky DFS play. Wouldn't be shocked to see him, score 11 or 12 half PPR points in this with a touchdown. If he's getting peppered with some targets, if Indianapolis is getting after Caleb Williams. On the run blocking side, Chicago historically has been bad this season, but Indianapolis has also been really, really bad. I can't remember who they played week 1. Gave up, it was Houston actually, so they gave up a ton to Mixon, right? He had that monster game against them. Josh Jacobs, we saw last week, I think he had 150 or 160 yards rushing. So don't be shocked if Chicago actually runs the ball very effectively in this. Swift is their main back there, so I'd expect him to get the bulk, but I don't think he's as good of a rusher as Herbert. So Herbert also, I think he's not going to get a ton of volume, but I think he's going to be pretty effective when he does get the ball against this Indianapolis defense. Probably not playable in any sort of DFS or any league, but just keep an eye out for Herbert there. Indianapolis side, number 10 in offensive pass protection. Chicago 18th in the pass rush, so they should have a little bit of time to throw the ball, which is good for Anthony Richardson and his accuracy issues. In terms of pass DVOA, Chicago number 8, Indianapolis 18. It's in the favor of Chicago's defense. Now, I think their defense is actually pretty solid, probably a little bit better than what these numbers are showing. So Indy may struggle a little bit in this department, but if they got time to throw, we do have a dome game here. Anthony Richardson can chuck the ball like 70 yards in the air, when he's out there. So keep that in mind. Alec Pierce has been the deep threat so far this season. And Pittman, one of those guys that you kind of want to avoid. He hasn't been targeted that much compared to Alex Pierce and A.D. Mitchell and some of his cohorts there. We might have Josh Downs coming back, I believe. He's got a potential to come back, which just kind of muddies the water as well. So Pittman's kind of a fave for me in all leagues. I think I might bench him actually in my Scott Fishbowl, despite him being one of my more top drafted wide receivers in that league. I think I'll just not play him in this particular matchup, despite Indy having time. I just think that wide receiver room's a little muddied. In terms of running the ball, Indianapolis 24th in run blocking, Chicago 13th, so that's heavily in the favor of Chicago. But then the run DVOA, Indianapolis number 5, so they've been pretty effective when they do run the ball. Chicago number 12 in defensive run DVOA. Not much to glean from this. I think, Jonathan Taylor, pretty decent running back, but Chicago, like I said, I think their defense is a little bit better than these numbers suggest, so I don't expect Indianapolis to be super effective running the ball. They're not going to be necessarily super effective passing the ball despite having time. It's just going to be maybe some of those deep bombs. Nice thing is Indy does play quick. Chicago plays fairly quick, top 10, top 13 in neutral situation, and Indy top 3 in both of those categories. And, in neutral situations, they're number 2. So they are quick teams. I just don't see them perhaps being super effective, but maybe Chicago being a little bit more effective than they're used to. I think this Vegas line's pretty good here. Indianapolis at home. Chicago, I think, actually slightly the better team here, but not so great that they can overcome the 3 points that Vegas usually gives them as a home team. And the other game here tied for 5th at 43.5 for a Vegas game total. San Francisco going into the Rams, a dome game here, but they are 6.5 point road favorites, giving them a 25 team implied total. The Rams at 18.5. San Francisco actually with the 3rd best team implied total on the main slate. Rams at 17th. Getting into the offensive pass protection, San Francisco 31st, so they've been taking some sacks. Rams 22nd in getting after the quarterback and generating sacks, slightly in the favor of the Rams here. Do they get some sacks in this game? Certainly possible. The pass DVOA though, San Francisco number 10, Rams have been pretty poor at 27. That's a green-red matchup. So despite San Francisco maybe being in a little bit of pressure, I think they should be very successful passing the ball. Problem is they have Deebo Samuel out. They now have George Kittle out. They also have Christian McCaffrey out. So hopefully the run game looks good for them and they can lean on Jordan Mason. Oh, look at that. Offensive run blocking, number 4 for San Francisco. Rams 28th. That's very good. San Francisco run DVOA 18th. Rams 29th. I think this is a Mason game. Brandon Ayuk probably going to get a huge target volume in this. Is he going to be super heavily high ceiling in this? I'm not sure. I think it's going to be more of a run game here because I think the Rams are going to struggle a little bit on offense with all of their injuries. So I think this is really a Mason game for San Francisco. I'd probably be avoiding Ayuk to an extent, not fading him altogether, but I think he's probably going to be a popular DFS play in this particular matchup, and I'm not sure if I want that, whereas ceiling is maybe a little bit limited based off of the opponent. Rams 19th in offensive pass protection, San Francisco 6th. Expect some sacks here of Stafford and the quarterbacks there in the Rams. Pass DVOA for Rams 23rd, San Francisco's defense 12th. That's in the favor of San Francisco as well. We got injuries to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp for the Rams. It's going to be a big struggle for them to move the ball. They're going to have to get the ball out quick. Probably going to be dumping it off to the tight end a little bit more. So Colby Parkinson, probably the biggest beneficiary of all of these injuries. And the Rams haven't really ever passed the ball to the running back all that often, but they might need to in this. So don't be shocked if we see Kyren Williams with a few pass catches in this. A little bit more than we're perhaps used to from the Rams teams. 27th in run blocking and 27th in run DVOA are the Rams on offense. Fortunately for them, San Francisco 30th in stopping the run and then 20th in the run DVOA, so they're not as good on defense there. Rams might find it more effective running the ball in this particular matchup than passing it. I just don't see them necessarily being in a scenario where they can run the ball a bunch, but I think they're going to try it to start. Sean McVay, I do trust him to come up with a game plan that at least tries to do that and limit their exposure to that that pass defense. So keep that in mind. I think Rams are just going to struggle in general. San Francisco is going to dominate with Mason in general. Probably a game I'm going to avoid outside of Mason for San Francisco in any sort of DFS lineups. All right, 7th best game total on the main slate, Seattle and Miami. This is a Seattle home game. They are 4.5 point home favorites with a 41.5 Vegas game total. Obviously, with the Tua injury, pretty scary last week. This number has gone down from what you probably would have expected. Otherwise, it probably would have been one of the top 3 or 4 games this week. But Seattle, 23-point team implied total. Miami, 18.5. That's good for 10th best and 17th best on the main slate. On Miami side, number 11 in pass protection. Seattle, 19th in the pass rush. So Miami hopefully have a little bit of time for who's ever back there behind center. Probably Skylar Thompson, but you should have a little bit of time there. Miami's pass DVOA, though, number 21, Seattle number 3. I don't expect Miami to be very effective based off of this. Even with a competent Tua back there, they don't have that. So I expect them to be even less efficient than they otherwise would be. So Miami pass catchers probably an avoid, maybe even a Jalen Waddle. If you got some really solid options on your bench, they might be worthwhile starting this week. I can't give you really any names off the top of my head, but I just don't expect him to be performing very well in this particular matchup. And then the run blocking not looking great. Miami 31st in the run blocking, and then the run DVOA 26th, while Seattle 14th and 6th in stopping the run. So it doesn't look like Miami's going to be very effective running the ball. It doesn't look like they're going to be effective passing the ball. I don't like their offense in general here. You're going to start Achane no matter what. He does have the ability to pop off at any given touch. So, he's going to be in your lineup. I just wouldn't expect a huge game from him in this. You might see him catch a bunch of passes, but that remains to be seen with Skylar Thompson back there, how he handles that. On the Seattle side for offense, 13th in offensive pass protection, Miami 20th. So maybe a little bit of time to throw the ball here for Seattle, and then they should be pretty effective. They're number 4 in offensive pass DVOA, so Ryan Grubb getting that offense going on the pass game. Miami 30th in pass DVOA, so a huge favor, red-green matchup here for Seattle's favor on offense. I would expect DK Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN to have pretty solid matchups here, especially if they're going to have time to throw Metcalf and probably JSN. I heard the coach, call him a sneaky deep threat. So those two probably a little bit more likely to get deep than Lockett at this stage in his career. And then the run game, it sounds like Walker is doubtful, so I don't expect him to play, but it doesn't look like a great matchup for Seattle's run game. They're 26th in run blocking, Miami 20th, and then Seattle 24th in run DVOA, Miami 23rd. While they're not very effective, they are playing a defense that's also not very effective. They might be a little bit better than you expect, but I wouldn't expect them to be that great, especially when the pass game is so successful in this particular matchup. Seattle does play quick, number 4 and number 2 in overall pace of play in neutral situation. And then at all times when it's within 8 points, they're the fastest team in the league. But yeah, this one looks like Seattle's going to take this to the bank. I don't mind Geno Smith in DFS. He's got plenty of stacking options that you can, take 2 of those pass catchers that I named earlier. Fant as a, large field tournament pivot off of those 3. A Fant and Metcalf, or a Fant and JSN and Geno Smith. Could be a winning combination for you in DFS. And let me know if you hit $1 million taking that advice. I'll take a cut of that if you are willing. Getting into the 8th best game total on the main slate, we have Tampa Bay hosting Denver as 6.5 point home favorites. 41 Vegas game total, giving Tampa Bay a 23.75 team implied total, which is good for 6th best on the main slate. Denver down at 17.25, really bad, 21st on the main slate. Denver's offensive pass protection, number 6. Tampa Bay, number 32 in defensive pass rush, so a red-green matchup there. Wouldn't expect Denver to take a bunch of sacks in this particular matchup. I don't think Bo Nix is any good anyway, but they're just getting the ball out so quick, so they're not taking a ton of sacks. Tampa Bay hasn't been able to get a ton of sacks or get after the quarterback in that fashion, so keep that in mind. Tampa Bay, a popular waiver wire ad in terms of suggested defenses this week just because of Denver's turnover prone, but I don't see them getting a ton of sacks, and that's where a lot of that comes from anyway, so not so sure I like Tampa Bay's defense. Especially if they're going to be popular in DFS, they're a fade for me. The pass DVOA, though, as I said, Denver not very good. They're 29, Tampa Bay 13th. I would expect Denver to struggle on offense there, just having time to throw. They're not going to not having time to throw, but they get the ball out quick, so don't expect them to take sacks. Run blocking, 29th and 30th for Denver on offense, pretty poor. Tampa Bay just slightly below average at 17th and 18th. But that's well ahead of where Denver's offensive line is. I'd expect Tampa Bay to be able to stop Denver in the run game as well. So Expect Denver to get the ball out quick and not be very effective with their passes, and then also struggle in the run game. So bad combination in general for Denver. 17 points or 17.25 seems a little lofty here based off of this. In terms of Tampa Bay, number 26 in offensive pass protection, Denver 15th in defensive pass rush. That's in the favor of Denver's defense. Might see Baker get sacked a couple of times in this particular matchup. Fortunately for Tampa Bay, though, even if they are under a little bit of pressure or taking a few sacks, when they do get the ball out, they should be very effective. Tampa Bay, number 5 in offensive pass DVOA and 31st for Denver's defense in pass DVOA. So Godwin's really been the one that you've wanted in fantasy through 2 weeks. Evans, a little bit less volume, but more of the touchdown threat. So keep that in mind if you're going to pick up, Baker to play in DFS. Certainly stack him with those two and probably no one else. Run game for Tampa Bay has been bad. It's been bad for several years. No different this year, 30th and 29th in the run blocking categories. And then Denver 18th and 13th. I'd expect Rachaad White to struggle. I'd expect Bucky Irvin to struggle, Sean Tucker to struggle. Doesn't really matter who's back there this week. I think they're going to have a little bit of difficulty. If they're going to be moving the ball, it's going to be via the air. Again, Baker, I think, is in play in DFS in this particular matchup against Denver, especially if Denver's not moving the ball, turning it over to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay struggling to run it, and they're probably going to have to be in third down quite a bit. I like their opportunities to be passing the ball quite often in this particular game. Tampa Bay, a slower paced team. Denver actually pretty quick, but shouldn't play too big of a role in this game. All right, 9th best game total on the slate here. Carolina heading into Las Vegas. If you can believe it or not, Vegas 6-point home favorites against Carolina, giving Carolina a 17-point team implied total because that Vegas game total is at number 40. Vegas 23-point team implied total, 10th best on the slate. Carolina 22nd best on the main slate. So this is actually my sneaky fun play for the DFS community this week. We see a lot of red on the offensive and defensive lines, so I think these offenses are going to find it a little bit easier than they're used to actually move the ball in this. Getting into the Carolina side, 24th in pass protection, but Vegas 29th in that pass rush. They're not getting sacks in scenarios where you'd expect it, but we do have Crosby there, who is a problem. I think he will be getting after the quarterback. But we have Andy Dalton now back there, and I think he's a little bit more competent than Bryce Young at this stage in both of their careers. So keep that in mind. Carolina, worst team in offensive pass DVOA. But that's with Bryce Young. I would expect that to be a little bit better under Andy Dalton. I think he's a little bit more of a competent, if not below average, but well below average for Bryce Young. So I think we're upgrading with Andy Dalton here. And fortunately for them, Las Vegas 23rd in pass DVOA. So they might find it a little bit easier to pass the ball on this one. If anybody from Carolina is going to do well, it's probably going to be the guys able to get open. So I think Dalton's one of those guys. He understands what the defense is giving him. He's going to get to the guys that get open, not necessarily the guys that aren't open. He's not that kind of a quarterback. So I think you're looking at Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen really in the pass game, and that's it for Carolina. In terms of run blocking, Carolina 25th. Vegas, unfortunately for them, 11 in stopping the run, but that's kind of offensive and defensive line adjusted. The DVOA for Carolina 31st, which is bad. Las Vegas, though, 28th. So that's indicative that Carolina might actually be a little bit more successful running the ball than they're used to as well against this Vegas defense. That's why I said this is kind of a sneaky DFS game. I wouldn't be too terribly shocked if we saw Chuba Hubbard get quite a bit of action and be successful in this game. I don't know what kind of ceiling is there, but I wouldn't be shocked to see 80 to 90 total yards in this. And if he plops in the end zone, he's probably going to be a pretty good play for you this week. Getting into the Vegas side, 28th in offensive pass protection, pretty bad. Fortunately for them, Carolina, one of the worst at generating sacks. They're at 30th in defensive pass rush. And then pass DVOA, Vegas 24th, Carolina 26th. Interesting enough, Vegas is one of the most pass, heavy teams, if you want to call it that. Their pass rate over expected, I think, is top 5 through the first 2 weeks of the game, exactly opposite of what we were expecting coming into the season. So Gardner Minshew, I think, is a deep dart throw candidate to do really well in this. The problem is, kind of depends on Carolina's offense. If Carolina can score some points, I think this is where this gets into a sneaky shootout scenario where it's the Andy Dalton versus Gardner Minshew, 30 points apiece game. I don't know if it's going to go that route, but if Carolina can keep pace, I think we could see Minshew with a pretty solid near 300 passing yard game. So if you're on the DK, I wouldn't be shocked to see him get that 300-yard bonus if Carolina can keep pace here with Vegas in this week. The reason for hesitancy, though, is Carolina's run defense is not very good, 29th and 27th, which I think mitigates how bad Las Vegas has been running the ball at 28th and 31st. I think Vegas is going to see the run game be a lot more successful than they had through those first 2 weeks playing Baltimore. I can't remember who they played week 1, but Baltimore, pretty solid defense there. A little bit more difficult to run on. I think Zamir White and Alexander Madison are going to have a lot more success there in this particular matchup. So that's my only hesitation with a stack there for Vegas and Gardner Minshew. But if you get Minshew, don't be shocked if Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers are the ones leading the charge. Wouldn't be shocked to see both of them both over 100 yards receiving, touchdown apiece in this particular matchup. Gardner Minshew certainly a capable enough quarterback to make that happen, especially against a defense like this in Carolina. Zamir White, I think, certainly a deep dart throw in DFS tournaments that are large field as well. Don't need to get too crazy in the smaller field tournaments, though. All right, 10th best game total on the main slate here. Sunday early game, Giants heading into Cleveland. Cleveland 6.5-point home favorites. 22.5 team implied total for Cleveland, 12th best on the slate. New York Giants, all the way at 16th, I believe. This might be the worst on the slate. 23rd best on the main slate. So Giants 17th and up pass protection. Cleveland able to get after the quarterback at number 6. 25th in pass DVOA for the Giants. Cleveland number 10 in pass DVOA. It's going to be a Daniel Jones struggle bus game against Cleveland here. Only viable pass catching option for the Giants, I believe, would be Malik Neighbors, and if you want to consider it, Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary may actually have a decent time in this particular game. They are 11th in run blocking, the Giants, and Cleveland 21st in stopping the run. Then the DVOAs are a little bit closer. Giants 21st, Cleveland 25th. Devin Singletary, definitely somebody that is startable in a pinch. I know some of the running backs have gone down, and he is certainly capable of coming off your bench if that's where he's at to come in and give you a start this week against this Cleveland defense. Tim and Neighbors and pretty much no one else on that Giants side. Cleveland side, they're actually 22nd in offensive pass protection. Giants 8th. Don't be shocked to see Watson take a few sacks in this. Giants defense is a little bit better than people expect in that front four and getting after the quarterback. Pass DVOA, though, Cleveland 31st, Giants 28th. Giants a pretty bad pass defense there, but Cleveland also pretty bad at offense so far. They might find it a little bit easier against this terrible Giants defense. Watson certainly, I think, is in play, but he might need to get the ball out a little bit quicker than you would hope for against this Giants front. The run blocking seems to be a little bit heavily or a little bit more in favor for Cleveland here to be moving the ball. They're 16th in run blocking, middle of the pack. Giants red, though, at 23rd. And then pretty close in run DVOA. Cleveland 20, Giants 21st. Really, it's going to be a game, I think, where the Giants, if they're going to be successful at all, it's going to be running the ball. Cleveland looks like they may, be better off a little bit passing this week compared to most. And then their run game may be a little bit average to below average in this, or a little bit above average in this game. Really nothing to write home about other than quick pace of play for the Giants, and overall pace of play for Cleveland's actually pretty high, number 9. Could see a little bit of pace in this back and forth. I don't see where this game really has any sort of ceiling for anybody. So keep that in mind. Best bet, Amari Cooper here in the pass game. He's got a lot of unrealized air yards that could come to fruition against the Giants. And then the run game, it looks like Foreman's getting a little bit more involved there than you'd want if you're a Ford manager. So I don't think either of those guys super playable in this particular matchup. All right, 11th game on the main slate. We have Green Bay heading into Tennessee. Tennessee actually 2.5-point Vegas favorites here. 38-point Vegas game total. Tennessee got 20.25 of those. Green Bay has 17.75 of those Vegas game totals. Those team implied totals, Tennessee 16th best, Green Bay 20th best. Getting into the Green Bay side, they're number 2 in offensive pass protection, so haven't been taking a lot of sacks. Tennessee, middle of the pack there at number 14, and then pass DVOA, Green Bay have been very effective, number 6th. Tennessee, though, number 9 in defensive pass DVOA, so their defense a little bit better than people probably expected coming into the season. Green Bay might not pass the ball as effectively as they want to in this, despite having some time, so keep that in mind. Sounds like Jordan Love is potentially in line to already play. I think he's only questionable for this game, not doubtful, so we could see him. If that's the case, I certainly like the Green Bay pass game a lot more than with Malik Willis in this matchup. If Willis is playing, it's going to be a struggle game here for Green Bay. If you get word that Love is going to play in this, I would flip that Vegas line, and I would say Green Bay would probably be the favorites in this matchup. So the run blocking, Green Bay 21st in run blocking, Tennessee number 4 in stopping the run. And then those run DVOAs are actually flipped. Green Bay number 8 in run DVOA, Tennessee 17th in run DVOA. Kind of weird when they're flip-flop like that. To be honest, I haven't known what to make of those scenarios when they pop up, especially early in the season. They tend to be flip-flop like that based off of some variance, touchdown variance, things like that. So really kind of a neutral game there. Josh Jacobs is really the lead guy there. He's the one getting the volume and the only one that would be playable in any sort of DFS or season-long league. On the Tennessee offensive side, they're 25th in pass protection. Fortunately for them, Green Bay not really getting after the quarterback in terms of sacks. They're 27th in the pass rush, but they are 16th in pass DVOA on defense. Tennessee 28th in offensive pass DVOA. We have seen Will Levis make some really boneheaded plays. I think he's otherwise been playing a little bit better than he did last year as a rookie, but he's just got to cut some of those really stupid I don't know what you want to call it, trying to play some hero ball, whip it out when he's getting sacked and just throws it up, at best a 50-50 ball, but probably more of a 20-80 ball for his player, and then ends up being a really bad decision and going the opposite direction and giving up points on offense or giving them directly to the defense to score. So hopefully he can learn from his mistakes and not do that here, because he could be one of those scenarios where he's struggling to throw it in this matchup. Run blocking ways, Tennessee 17th, Green Bay 12th in stopping it, but then the run DVOA, Tennessee 11, Green Bay 24th. Looks like we could see Pollard have an okay game on the ground here against Green Bay. I wouldn't be too shocked to see that. I'm not sure what's going on with Tyjae Spears. I think he's going to play, but might be a little bit limited in this, which could mean a little bit more run for Pollard in this matchup too, especially if they're trying to kind of mask, if you will Levis's struggles. We could see Pollard with a bigger workload in this matchup. All right, and then the worst game on the slate, the main slate here, early game, Chargers taking on Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, this is actually a 34.5-point Vegas game total, so pretty low. Pittsburgh, 18.5 team implied total as the favorite, is the 17th best on the slate. Chargers at 16th, 16 team implied total, 23rd best on the slate. I think that's tied with the Giants. Offensive pass protection, Chargers been really good, number 4 in that regard. They will take a test here against Pittsburgh in their pass rush. TJ Watt there, super good. Surprisingly that they're only 23rd in the defensive pass rush, which is their adjusted sack rate. But I think they do generate a decent amount of pressure. But the Chargers do have a good line, so keep that in mind. Offensive pass DVOA, number 16 for the Chargers, middle of the pack. Pittsburgh been pretty good, though, at number 6. So expect them to not be super well. They might have some time to throw in this one, which is good for, I think, Quentin Johnston. Surprisingly enough this season, he's performing pretty well. And then the run blocking side, Chargers number 9 on run blocking, Pittsburgh number 8, and then both teams at 10 in the offensive and defensive run DVOA. So pretty evenly matched there, where you say studs eat. It's been a pretty even split for the Chargers in terms of Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I think that's going to continue moving forward. Dobbins obviously has been the more efficient runner in terms of explosive plays, getting into the end zone. Does that continue each and every game? I don't really know. I think it's just been, we've seen a few fluky longer runs from Dobbins that just he got into the end zone. I don't think he's always going to be the one getting in there. I think at times that's going to be Gus Edwards. Could this be the Gus Edwards game? Certainly could be, but really low Vegas game total. We got Justin Herbert with a high ankle sprain. He's questionable to play. If he is out there, he's going to probably be pretty limited. If he's not out there, it's Easton Stick, and they're going to struggle, which might mean they lean more on the run game, but then Pittsburgh can kind of key in on that. So kind of a weird one. I don't think this is a game that you're going to want to attack at all. Pittsburgh side, 18th in offensive pass protection. Chargers 11th in pass rush, slightly in the favor there of the Chargers and getting after the quarterback. It should by all means be Justin Fields there for Pittsburgh after their 2-0 start. And then Chargers number 1 in pass DVOA. Pittsburgh actually number 9 in offensive pass DVOA under the helm of Justin Fields. So pretty wild there, top 10 in offensive pass DVOA. George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth are really the only options in the pass game here outside the running back. So keep that in mind. And then Pittsburgh on their run DVOA number 25, actually in run DVOA. Chargers number 3, heavily in the favor of Chargers being able to stop the run. I really don't like Harris or Jalen Warren in this. Just not looking great there based off of this run DVOA, even though the run blocking in the favor of Pittsburgh here, 14 versus Chargers 19. This run DVOA heavily in the favor of the Chargers. I just think they're going to do a little bit better job of stopping that run game of Pittsburgh, and they do like to run a lot. So I think Pittsburgh is going to struggle a little bit on offense. I think the Chargers are going to struggle on offense, a game you can probably avoid. If anybody, you're probably going to want that Pittsburgh kicker. He's been pretty good so far. All right, island game matchup here, Sunday Night Football. Kansas City going into Atlanta. Kansas City actually 3-point road favorites here, 24.75 team implied total for Kansas City. Atlanta at 21.75 for their team implied total, giving us a Vegas game total of 46.5. Again, this island game, so we don't have a game total rank. But Kansas City, 15th in offensive pass protection. Atlanta, 25th in the pass rush. Big favor there for Kansas City, not taking sacks. And then offensive pass DVOA, 13 for Kansas City, 18 for Atlanta. That is in the favor of Kansas City's pass offense there, but not a huge favor. So I think it's just going to be a standard day at the office. Rashee Rice probably going to be pretty good here. Don't be shocked if we see Kelsey get a little bit more involved against Atlanta here as well. Run blocking side, Kansas City number 8, Atlanta 15th. That is in the favor of Kansas City. And then run DVOA, Kansas City 19, Atlanta 16. I think with the running back issues there in Kansas City, they're probably going to be, using Steele on the early downs and then getting P. Ryan involved in the third down situations. I think that's just going to be a split backfield, one to avoid, especially in an island game there where it's going to be split. You're going to want to attack that Kansas City pass game in the island game. So Mahomes, Rashee Rice, maybe Xavier Worthy if you want to get cheap, or Justin Watson as a cheap option as well. I think he's going to be in play in this matchup. Atlanta, number 9 in offensive pass protection. So Kirk not taking a lot of sacks. Kansas City 26 in the pass rush. That's good for Atlanta to have time. And then 15th in offensive pass DVOA, Kansas City 20th, is in the favor of Atlanta's offense. They should have time to throw, and they should be fairly effective moving the ball, or at least above average moving the ball through the air. And then the run game is where it's at. Atlanta, number 2 in run blocking. Kansas City, red, 24, so red-green matchup there. Heavily in the favor of Atlanta's offense. Bijan in play. Tyler Algier should be effective as well. Run DVOA also very similar. Atlanta top 5 at number 4. Kansas City 22nd. So a number 4 versus a number 22 in the favor of Atlanta's offense. Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson, certainly both in play in an island game captain's matchup. With Kansas City's pass game being very effective, I think Atlanta's pass game should be pretty effective. If they got a ton of time, don't be surprised if Darnell Mooney actually scores a long touchdown in this one. It seems like they have a connection, they being Kirk Cousins and Mooney. I do like that in an island game with some variance. He is probably their deep threat and one of the best ones. Although we've seen the slot guy there, Ray McLeod, be strangely more involved than you would expect otherwise. So keep that in mind for the island game. All right, and then we have a 2-game matchup on Monday Night Football. So a little interesting here. Let's get that cursor out of the way. So we're going to go with the number 1 game total on the slate, which is Washington and Cincinnati. Number 1 game total at 47 Vegas game total. That is a 7.5-point favorite for Cincinnati at home, giving them a 27.25 team implied total. Washington 19.75 team implied total. First and worst in the 2-game slate on Monday nights. Washington 29th in offensive pass protection. Cincinnati 24th. Washington may take a few less sacks than they're used to. Washington is number 12 in pass DVOA. Cincinnati number 15 in pass DVOA. A little bit in the favor of Washington. Don't be shocked if their pass game's a little bit more effective here this week than maybe otherwise has been so far this season. Run blocking, though, pretty good. Number 10 for Washington is green. Cincinnati 27th, and stopping the run is red. So it seems like Washington's offensive line pretty good there in blocking. In terms of effectiveness in that DVOA, dead even, Washington 14 and Cincinnati 14. So maybe Washington's running back's not the greatest, despite the line giving them some pretty good opportunities. But I think they'll be pretty effective in this. Washington does seem like they'll be able to move the ball okay in general in this particular matchup. So that shouldn't alarm you too terribly in this. Cincinnati number 20 in offensive pass protection. Washington 31st. Cincinnati 22nd in offensive pass DVOA. Washington 32nd. Washington is absolutely horrendous against the pass. Don't be shocked if Joe Burrow has a monster game in this, despite them being, in the 20s here in the offensive categories. Washington truly just brutal. Got picked apart by Sam Darnold. We saw Malik Neighbors have a monster game. Jamar Chase probably going to have a monster game in this as well. So week 1, Justin Jefferson, huge game. Week 2, Malik Neighbors, huge game. Week 3, probably going to be the Jamar Chase show, having a monster week. Run game, Cincinnati number 7, Washington number 10, stopping the run. Cincinnati number 9 in run DVOA, Washington 11. Pretty even matchup there. I think Cincinnati is going to move the ball through the air. I would kind of ignore that run game, especially in the island game matchup. Jamar Chase is probably going to be the guy in my captain slot if I'm playing just this game solo. Would have to figure out if I'm playing both games on Monday night what I'm going to do based off of what we're about to see next. All right, and then second game on this Monday Night Football slate, we have a 45.5 Vegas game total as Buffalo 5-point home favorites, giving them a 25.25 team implied total. Jacksonville 20.25 team implied total. Those are the second and third best on the slate with the Cincinnati-Washington game. All right, on the Jacksonville side, 30th in offensive pass protection, Buffalo 13th in defensive pass rush, indicative that Buffalo may get a few sacks in this against Trevor Lawrence, but that pass DVOA dead even 11-11. Really a situation where you say studs eats. Jacksonville, do they have studs? I don't know. They got Christian Kirk. They got Brian Thomas Jr. I think both of those guys are sufficient. Buffalo's defense, I don't think, is that good, and it might be a little bit inflated from that Miami game where they got up so big. So keep that in mind. They did struggle against Arizona, who does, in their own right, look pretty good. But, so that's the pass game for Jacksonville on offense. Run blocking is worse, 13th for Jacksonville, number 3 for Buffalo's run defense, and then Jacksonville 17th in run DVOA, Buffalo number 7. Travis Etienne probably off my list. Tank Bigsby a little bit hurt. I don't know if he's going to play in this one or not, but Travis Etienne probably off my DFS list based off of this matchup. Jacksonville just doesn't look like they're going to be moving the ball particularly well, and if they do, it's going to be in the air. Now, Buffalo's offensive side, it's a little bit better. Number 5 in offensive pass protection, so not taking a lot of sacks. Jacksonville 21st in defensive pass rush, so might be able to pressure them, but not really getting sacks there. So indicative, Buffalo may have a little bit of time here. And then the pass DVOA number 1 for Buffalo, Jacksonville 21st. Buffalo should be very effective passing the ball. So far, we've seen that be Khalil Shakir's show. And really not a ton of other help there. We do have the rookie, Keon Coleman, who's an option. I think we could see the tight end, which was everybody's kind of number 1 target there going into the season, have a good game here as well. Those would be the only 3 I'd be focusing on in the pass game there. So that's Kincaid, the tight end, by the way, for Buffalo. Might be his first big game of the week or big game of the season. Run game for Buffalo, 18th. Jacksonville 7th in stopping the run. Then Buffalo 13 in run DVOA, Jacksonville 15th. If Buffalo's going to be moving the ball effectively, it's probably going to be in the air. I'd expect us to attack that in DFS, where we have seen very effective week 1 and week 2 from James Cook. I think that run kind of stops here against Jacksonville. We see Buffalo pass the ball with ease and not rely so much on James Cook in this particular matchup. All right, that's going to do it for the adjusted line play report on week 3. I hope I gave you some information that you can take to build out those DFS lineups, to make those start-sit decisions, to go in and look at those prop bets and say, wow, based off of this line is way off. It's too high. It's too low. You can go place those bets, win some money. That's what it's all about. I'm here to give you some info and hopefully make you a little bit more informed for your decision-making processes on your start-sit decisions, your DFS lineups, and then those prop bets. That's the whole point of this adjusted line player report, is to help you with your information to go win some money. That's the whole plan. Let's win some money together. Thanks for watching, folks. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed these adjusted line play reports and you're getting a ton of value out of them. Certainly appreciate the support. Again, let's go win some money together. Peace.